Look at somebody next to you and tell them, this season is not about you anymore, it's about me, because I spent too long trying to save people who wouldn't save themselves. I spent too long explaining myself to people who already decided not to understand me. I spent too long pouring into cups that had holes in them. But tonight something shifts. Tonight I make an announcement to my past, my pain, and my distractions. I am focusing on me from now on. Hear me when I say this. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It is survival. You cannot keep losing yourself trying to keep everybody else comfortable. You cannot heal in the same place that keeps wounding you, and you cannot become who God called you to be while carrying the weight of people who refuse to grow. There comes a moment in life when you stop asking, why don't they see my value? And you start declaring, I see my value. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. This is the moment you stop chasing approval and start chasing purpose. From now on, I choose clarity over chaos, growth over guilt, and purpose over people pleasing. Let me say this slowly because somebody has been living in this place for far too long. You cannot heal while you are being everyone's backup plan. You cannot recover while you are constantly on call. You cannot rebuild while you are always standing in the emergency room of other people's lives. Every time they break something, they dial your number. Every time they fall apart, they knock on your door. And because you have a good heart, because you are strong, because you've survived things that should have destroyed you, you keep showing up. Even when you are bleeding yourself, you became the reliable one, the dependable one, the strong one, the one who will understand. And somewhere along the way, your strength became a hiding place for other people's irresponsibility. They didn't change because you kept carrying them. They didn't grow because you kept cushioning the fall. They didn't heal because you became the painkiller instead of letting them feel the wound. And while you were busy saving everybody else, nobody noticed that you were quietly losing yourself. Hear me clearly. Just because you can handle it does not mean you should. Just because you survived it does not mean it didn't cost you something. Every time you put your needs last, you told yourself a story that said, I'll deal with me later. But later kept getting postponed, later kept getting delayed, later kept getting buried under somebody else's crisis. And now you're tired, not because life is hard, but because you've been living life for everybody except yourself. You can't heal in fragments. Healing demands presence. Healing demands rest. Healing demands honesty. And you can't be present with yourself when you are constantly monitoring other people's emotions, cleaning up their messes, and managing their reactions. You can't rest when your phone is a 24-hour emergency line. You can't be honest with yourself when you're too busy pretending you're okay so everyone else can stay comfortable. There is a difference between love and self-erasure. Love does not require you to disappear. Love does not demand that you bleed in silence. Love does not ask you to be the last one standing in a collapsing building. Some of the people you keep rescuing are not drowning, they are refusing to swim. And every time you jump in to save them, you teach them that they don't have to learn how. This is the moment where you step out of the backup role, not because you are cold, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally decided that your healing matters too. You are allowed to be unavailable. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to choose yourself without explaining it to anyone. And when you stop being everybody's safety net, something powerful happens. You create space for your own restoration. You give your soul room to breathe again. You stop leaking strength into situations that were never assigned to you. Healing begins the moment you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's emergencies. And from this point forward, you make a holy decision. I will not abandon myself just to prove that I am strong. I choose to heal. Let me take you deeper into this, because distractions don't announce themselves as enemies. They don't knock on the door wearing a warning label. They slide in quietly, dressed up as urgency, responsibility, opportunity, and sometimes even love. They don't look dangerous at first. They look familiar. They look necessary. They look like things you can't deal with later. And before you realize it, your attention is fractured, your energy is scattered, and your purpose is postponed. Distractions are not always bad things. That's what makes them so effective. Some distractions are good things at the wrong time. Some are important things that don't belong in your season. Some are people who matter but don't need front row access to your focus. And because you don't discern the difference, you give everything equal priority until nothing gets the excellence it deserves. Your destiny doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It leaks away minute by minute, notification by notification, interruption by interruption. Every distraction steals twice. It steals your time and it steals your clarity. You can get time back, but clarity is harder to recover once it's been blurred. When your focus is divided, your decisions become reactive instead of intentional. You start responding instead of leading. You wake up busy but not effective, exhausted but not fulfilled, moving but not progressing. And the most dangerous part is that you feel productive while drifting away from what actually matters. Hear this truth. Whatever has your attention is shaping your direction. You don't drift toward purpose by accident. You drift away from it by distraction. The enemy of your calling is not always opposition. Sometimes it's overload. Too many voices, too many opinions, too many open tabs in your mind. And while you're trying to keep up with everything, the one thing you were assigned to do is waiting patiently for you to show up fully. Distractions also numb your sense of urgency. They make tomorrow feel close enough to delay obedience today. They convince you that you'll focus when things slow down, even though life rarely does. They train your mind to crave stimulation instead of depth, noise instead of stillness, movement instead of meaning. And the longer you stay distracted, the harder it becomes to sit still long enough to hear your own thoughts, let alone the direction you've been praying for. Some distractions are emotional, unresolved conversations, old wounds, imaginary arguments you keep replaying in your head. You're physically present, but mentally stuck in a moment that already passed. And while you're busy rehearsing the past, the future is calling your name unanswered. You can't step into what's next if your mind is camped in what was. When you remove distractions, resistance often shows up. Things that never demanded your attention suddenly become loud when you stop feeding them. People who benefited from your divided focus feel the shift. But clarity always creates friction before it creates freedom. When your attention is no longer available to everything, it becomes powerful enough to change something. Focus is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters with intention. And the moment you reclaim your attention, you reclaim your direction. What you protect will grow. What you ignore will fade. And when you stop letting distractions decide your day, you finally give your destiny a chance to speak louder than the noise. Let me speak to the part of you that feels guilty every time you try to protect your peace. The moment you draw a line, you start explaining yourself. The moment you say no, you feel the urge to apologize. And the moment you choose your well-being, a voice inside whispers that you're being difficult, selfish, or unloving. But hear me clearly. Boundaries are not walls built out of bitterness. They are doors placed with wisdom. They are evidence that you finally understand the value of what's on the inside. When you had no boundaries, people had unlimited access to you. They accessed your time, your energy, your emotions, your strength without permission and without responsibility. And because there was no cost, there was no care. People don't always abuse you because they are evil. Sometimes they overstep because there is no clear line telling them where to stop. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about clarifying what you can carry without breaking yourself. Every future you desire requires preservation. You cannot pour endlessly without replenishment. You cannot stay available to everyone and still be effective in what you were called to do. Boundaries are how you protect your yes by learning when to say no. And every no you say to what drains you is a yes to what strengthens you. That's not rejection. That's alignment. That's stewardship. That's maturity. Some people will only know the version of you that had no limits. And when you change, they will resist. Not because your boundaries are wrong, but because they benefited from your absence of them. They were comfortable with the version of you that overextended, overgave, and overexplained. So when you start valuing your future, they call it distance. When you start guarding your peace, they call it attitude. When you start protecting your time, they call it selfishness. But don't let their discomfort talk you out of your growth. Boundaries reveal priorities, both yours and theirs. People who respect you will respect your limits, even if they don't like them. People who only valued what you provided will push back when access is restricted. And that resistance becomes information. It shows you who is connected to you and who is just consuming you. Boundaries don't destroy relationships. They expose which ones were sustainable. Let me say this plainly. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Every time you ignore your own discomfort to keep the peace, you send a message that your needs are negotiable. And over time, that negotiation becomes a pattern where you are always the one compromising. Boundaries interrupt that cycle. They say, I matter too. They say, my health is not optional. They say, my future is worth protecting. There will be moments when enforcing boundaries feels lonely. Growth often is. But isolation is better than self-betrayal. Peace is better than popularity. And alignment is better than approval. When you stop leaking energy through open doors that were never meant to stay open, you begin to feel stronger, clearer, and more grounded. That's not hardness. That's healing. Boundaries are proof that you are no longer living on accident. They are evidence that you are intentional about your time, your purpose, and your future. And the moment you stop apologizing for protecting what matters, you step into a life that finally has room to thrive. Let me prepare you for a truth that doesn't get talked about enough, because if you're not ready for it, it can shake you. Growth will cost you familiar faces, not because you became better than anyone, not because you think you're superior, but because you are no longer compatible with the version of life you used to live. When you change, the environment has to change too. And sometimes that environment includes people you love, people you laughed with, people who knew your old struggles and your old language. Some people were assigned to a season, not a lifetime. They knew you when you were figuring it out, when you were surviving, when you were available at all hours and willing to shrink to keep the peace. But growth introduces new boundaries, new priorities, new standards. And when those show up, the relationship has to evolve or it will resist. Not everyone is willing to grow with you. Some people only felt secure when you stayed the same. Familiar faces often represent comfort. They know your history, your patterns, your weaknesses. And when you start changing, it disrupts the unspoken agreement that says, we stay the same together. Your growth becomes a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. They don't just see you differently, they start seeing themselves differently. And instead of rising, some choose to criticize. Instead of adapting, some choose to distance. Not because you did something wrong, but because your evolution challenged their stagnation. This is where many people sabotage themselves. They start shrinking back to fit into old spaces. They dim their light to avoid conflict. They compromise their growth to preserve familiarity. But hear me, outgrowing people does not mean you stop loving them. It means you stop living at a level that no longer matches who you are becoming. You cannot build a future while clinging to a past that no longer fits. Some relationships were built on versions of you that no longer exist. The you who tolerated chaos, the you who accepted inconsistency, the you who overgave just to feel included. When that version dies, the relationship feels threatened. And instead of celebrating your healing, some people will mourn the access they lost. They may call you distant, changed, or difficult. But change is the evidence that growth is happening. Let this settle in your spirit. You don't owe anyone the right to remain the same. You don't owe anyone your stagnation. You don't owe anyone the version of you that was hurting just to keep them comfortable. Growth is not betrayal. Healing is not abandonment. Evolution is not disrespect. It is obedience to the call on your life. There will be grief in this process. Letting go of familiar faces hurts, even when it's necessary. You may miss the laughter, the memories, the way things used to be, But nostalgia cannot be the architect of your future. You are moving forward, not erasing the past, just refusing to live there. And here is the promise. When you release what no longer aligns, you make room for what does. New connections, deeper relationships, people who recognize your growth and don't feel threatened by it, people who meet you where you are, not where you used to be. Growth always brings loss before it brings alignment. But what you gain will always be worth what you outgrow. Let me speak to the weight of this calling, because what you are carrying is not casual and it is not common. Your assignment requires your full attention, not half focus, not divided loyalty, not leftover energy at the end of a long day of pleasing everybody else. What you were put on this earth to do demands presence, clarity, and intention. And every time you scatter yourself, you delay the impact you were meant to have. You were not called to be everywhere. You were not designed to answer every request, attend every event, solve every problem, or carry every burden. Being accessible is not the same as being effective. When you try to be everywhere, you end up shallow in places where depth is required. Your assignment doesn't need more activity. It needs alignment. It needs you fully engaged, not emotionally exhausted and spiritually distracted. There is a reason focus feels heavy. Focus requires sacrifice. It requires turning down good opportunities so you can say yes to the right one. It requires disappointing people who expected unlimited access to you. It requires walking away from noise so you can hear direction. And that discomfort is often mistaken for fear, when in reality it is discipline being formed. You cannot fulfill a serious assignment with a casual mindset. When your attention is divided, your calling competes with everything else. It has to fight for space against social expectations, emotional obligations, and the constant demand to be available. And while you keep telling yourself you'll give it more time later keeps moving further away. Purpose does not thrive on leftovers. It responds to priority. There is also a spiritual cost to distraction. When you are unfocused, discernment weakens. You start making decisions based on pressure instead of purpose. You confuse movement with progress. You stay busy to avoid the stillness where clarity is found. And the more you avoid that stillness, the louder the noise becomes. Your assignment requires quiet moments, deep thinking, and uninterrupted effort. Without those, vision gets blurry. Some people will misunderstand your focus. They will call it distance. They will call it obsession. They will say you've changed. But what they are really seeing is your commitment. They were used to having access to you whenever they wanted. Now they see someone who knows where they are going and is no longer drifting. Focus always looks extreme to people who live distracted lives. Let me say this plainly. You cannot treat your purpose like a side project and expect it to produce a life-changing outcome. What you nurture will grow. What you neglect will wither. Your assignment deserves your best hours, your clearest mind, your strongest energy, not what's left after everyone else is satisfied. There will be moments when staying focused feels lonely. Isolation often accompanies alignment, but solitude is not abandonment, it is preparation. It is in those focused seasons that skills sharpen, vision matures, and confidence is built. What looks like separation is often development in disguise. When you give your assignment your full attention, something powerful happens. You stop chasing validation because you are grounded in direction. You stop comparing because you are consumed with purpose. You stop reacting to everything because you are committed to one thing. And that commitment creates momentum. You were never meant to be everywhere. You were meant to be effective right where you are called to stand. And when you focus fully on your assignment, the noise fades, the path clears, and the life you were created for finally begins to unfold. Let me close this with a truth that feels almost too simple to believe, yet powerful enough to change everything. When you focus on you, everything else finds its place. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer living from confusion. You are living from alignment. And alignment has a way of organizing chaos without you forcing it. For a long time, you tried to fix everything at once. You tried to manage people, control outcomes, rescue relationships, and hold situations together with your own strength. And the harder you tried, the more scattered things became. That's because nothing stays in order when the foundation is unstable. When you are disconnected from yourself, everything connected to you feels off balance. But the moment you start focusing inward, your healing, your growth, your clarity, life begins to recalibrate around that decision. When you focus on you, your decisions become cleaner. You stop choosing from fear and start choosing from understanding. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. You recognize what aligns and what drains without needing chaos to teach you the lesson again. Clarity replaces confusion. Peace replaces urgency. And suddenly, things that once felt complicated become obvious. Relationships begin to shift naturally. You stop forcing connections that require you to shrink. You stop chasing people who only valued your availability. And without bitterness, without announcements, you simply stand in your truth. The right people adjust. The wrong people drift. Not as punishment, but as a natural consequence of alignment. When you are focused on you no longer beg for understanding. You attract it. Your energy changes when your focus changes. You are no longer exhausted from over-explaining, over-giving, and overextending. You move with intention. You speak with confidence. You rest without guilt. And that energy becomes a filter. Opportunities that match your direction find you. Distractions that once pulled at you lose their grip. What belongs to you recognizes you when you are finally present. Even your struggles begin to make sense. Challenges don't disappear, but they stop feeling random. They become refining moments instead of breaking points. You learn faster because you're paying attention. You recover quicker because you're no longer abandoning yourself in the process. Growth feels difficult, but it also feels purposeful. When you focus on you, you stop trying to prove your worth. You already know it. You stop rushing the process because you trust the timing. You stop comparing paths because you understand your assignment, and that inner security creates an outer stability that no amount of external control ever could. Here's the shift. Focusing on you doesn't mean ignoring responsibility. It means meeting responsibility from a healthy place. It means showing up whole instead of depleted. It means building a life that supports you instead of drains you. And from that place, everything you touch becomes stronger. Peace becomes your compass. Clarity becomes your language. Purpose becomes your posture. You no longer chase alignment. You embody it. And when you do, life responds. This is why focusing on you is not selfish. It is strategic. It is necessary. It is transformative. Because when you finally take your place, everything else that belongs in your life falls into position naturally. So tonight, I stand flat-footed in faith, filled to make this declaration, not with anger, not with regret, but with authority. I am done shrinking to fit spaces that can't hold my destiny. I am done explaining my growth to people committed to my past. I am done bleeding in silence just to be called strong. From this moment forward, I choose alignment over approval. I choose purpose over pressure. I choose healing over history. If focusing on me makes the noise uncomfortable, let it be uncomfortable. If my growth makes familiar faces uneasy, let them adjust. I didn't come this far to live halfway. I didn't survive what I survived to stay the same. I release what no longer serves the future God is building through me. I rise focused. I rise grounded. I rise unapologetic. And here's the final word. I'm not falling apart. I'm falling into place.